Another episode of Stand-Up Memories. Jackie Martling, Peter Bales, and I have not been interrupted yet, so I'm just going to keep going. Our incredible guest, the wonderful John Blenn. John Blenn, writer, critic, playwright, historian, you name it, a sage, a true sage, and we're talking about everything entertainment.
John, are you having fun?
I am. It's fun to sit down with you guys and catch up. And
there is nothing more interesting to me than Peter's timing being wrecked by me not interrupting him.
That's the longest I ever...
He has never stammered like that in his life.
I haven't spoken that long.
It was so uncomfortable. I got to talk for like 10 seconds. That was just fun.
I get it. You plant the seeds, and now it looks like he just doesn't know what he's doing.
No,
so.
That's it. That's totally it.
Charlie Brown and Lucy and the football and the whole thing. Well, welcome again to our show. We love you being here.
Great to be back.
We love having you here. And last week you were talking about Jim Myers, otherwise known as Klaus Myers.
All right, now at the risk of this being a rerun, it's such a good story, I don't care. And it's really funny because I was working in Myrtle Beach, and they said, hey, your friend is coming in next week, Klaus Meyer. And I wanted to tell the story, but you can't tell the story if he's coming to town. Jim Myers was a comedian, or is, and then he tried a different act. We met him at Richard M. Dixon's, and he tried to do this, this nerdy type school teacher act, and that wasn't working. And he was trying this new act where he's going to pretend he's from Germany. And he called me up, and I'm booking governors, and he says, Jack, listen, I really need the money. I really need the gig. Let me be the middle act. I got this new thing, Klaus Meyer. I'm from Germany, but I haven't got much time. I only got like 8 or 10 minutes, but please hire me, and I'll fill out the rest of my time taking questions from the audience. And this is in the old days of governors, so the stage is there, and the seats were there, but there was an actual wall between the audience and the bar was still in the room, so the comedians would lean on the wall and watch the show. And we had so much fun sitting there and whispering and being rude to each other, or being rude to the act. And Myers goes on stage, and it might have been the first time he tried it, I'm not 100% sure. But he goes up, and this is a guy from Blue Point, Long Island, but he's, Nordic, German, he's blonde hair and, cheekbones. Hello, my name is Klaus Meyer. I am from Germany. My parents are from Hamburg. My grandparents are from Frankfurt. So I am kind of part Hamburger, part Frankfurter. They say that Germans are way too logical and structured. This is not true. Joke number one. Nothing. So we're sitting there, and they're giggling a little, and I must have been standing with the guys we started with, the Woods, Hawthorne, these guys that we all started out together in 1979, and we're standing there at the Wall and Governors, and so Myers decides now he's going to start doing his question and answer period. He goes, now maybe you'd like ask Klaus questions about Germany. I'll answer your questions best I can. Are any questions? And because he's going to fudge. He's just going to fudge to make up the time. Blah, 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 blah. And a guy, and I remember this when I tell it, we're on the wall, and the back table, the guy was sitting right here. And the guy raised his hand. He says, yes, what is your question? He says, how do you say the number 9 in German? And Myers' ears spin back. He turned red and he said, all right, I'm not fucking German, all right? And he ran off the stage. We laughed and laughed. Oh my God, it was like a gift from heaven, and he was mad for it. And it was, because he got pinned with an exact.
Listen to this, Myers.
So that's the greatest story in the world to tell on radio, but I couldn't tell it because the guy's coming to town.
Listen to this one. A great comedian named Melvin George was on stage at Chuckles. And it was the late 80s before cell phones. And his wife was having a baby. She was overdue. She was several days overdue. He's very nervous about it. He's wearing, in those days, a beeper, you know. And he's very, very keyed in to, you know, I'm going to get a call any moment, you know. And so he's on stage, Saturday night, packed house at Chuckles. He's doing great. Myers gets on the overhead mic, the offstage mic that talks to the whole audience, and he goes, "Excuse me, Melvin, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your wife called." And if it's possible for an African American to get pale, Melvin got very pale. And he starts going, and then Myers goes, "She says on the way home to pick up milk and bread." And everybody just, backstage, everybody laughed. The audience had no idea.
I think it's important to point out that for anybody out there who is unsure, that Jim Myers is like the dean of the practical jokers of the circuit. They told me when I was a journalist, they go, "You will know you have been accepted by the community when Myers pulls a practical joke on you." And I said,
"That's right.
He hasn't done anything to me at all." And then one day I'm actually doing a phone interview with Joan Jett. I'm about 2 minutes into it, and I get a phone. My administrative assistant comes in and goes, "Your father's on line 2. He says it's really important." I go, "Tell him I'll call him right back." And she's like, "Okay." She comes back in a minute later and she's just like, "No, he says it's an emergency. He's really got to talk to you." It's just like, "Well, see if you can find out what the emergency is." And I'm going, "I'm sorry, Joan." And this goes back and forth like 4 times. Finally, she comes in, she goes, "He says he has to speak to you directly. It's really sensitive." I was like, "Joan, is there some way I could call you back? Can you call me back from where you are?" And she said, "Well, yeah, okay, I'll call you back in 10 minutes. I hang up, I pick up the phone and go, "Dad, what's the matter?" "Can you believe I called just to tell you to go F yourself?" Click. That was it. The entire extent of it is just like, I'm going to kill him when I see him. So I said to Miniveri a couple of days later, I said, "This is what he did to me." He goes, "Yeah, you're not going to let him get away with that, are you?" And it's like, "You got a whole newspaper there." It's like, and it's April Fool's Week.
Oh.
Good point. So we actually doctored a photo, wrote a clip in the paper about Jim having a sex change, and took quotes out of like 10 comedians, like Miniveri goes, "Worst lay I ever had." And everybody, his pals are just zapping him up and down, and ran it. He only practically joked me once since then, all of these years.
Wow.
You got to be very careful of the people that pay you back.
Oh, without a doubt. Well, here's the funny thing about, we put him up at our house when he came in from California to do some shows at Governor's. And he had like a nightmare with us. He knocked over our Christmas tree because he was trying to put something behind it and it tipped. So when he put it back up again, everything's facing the corner and the tree's bare. He closed our back door on the way to the show and got the mat stuck in it. He turned on the tea kettle without checking to see if there was water and basically spot welded it to the top of my stuff. I mean, there's like 5 things like where he's like the worst house guest in the world. And I know I could tell it's not like him horsing around. He's really feeling bad that this chain of events has occurred. So we go to see him at a show and we lent him Joni's car. So we go in there and I go, I don't know if this guy's doing it intentionally or not. I go, but if he's doing it intentionally, I'm going to get even with him. And Joni goes, "It's probably just all coincidence. Let it go." Right. So we go in there, and Jim's up there during his German character, and he turns and goes, "I just wanted to take a moment out to say hello to 2 very special people in the audience. My beautiful American girlfriend, Joni, who I have lots of sex with, and her retarded brother, Todd." And I looked at Joan, and I went, God just spoke to me. I went outside and moved the car because I had a second key and moved it in between a couple of vans halfway across the lot because he had a Hollywood parking space right in front.
Right.
Went back in, saw Pat, the bartender, and I went, "Don't tell Myers where the car is until he's good," and freaked out. "We're just going to go home." So Jim comes out, sees the car isn't there, and he's like, "What else could go wrong?" And he didn't know. He goes back in and he's telling Pat the story. He's like, "These things happened at the house. I didn't mean them to happen, but now their car's been stolen. I have the key. I don't know what could have happened."
The last time.
Everybody loves hearing that because
I love it.
Oh, he had it coming. Absolutely had it
He
coming.
was the first guy that got me.
Yep.
The first guy that got me. Richie and me met at my father's place when him and Myers were auditioning for the Gong Show.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw me playing with the band, and he said, "You're very funny. Why don't you come to Richard M. Dixon's?" And I was, my band, we were kind of on the outs, so I said, okay, and I got my guitar and went to Richard M. Dixon's, and Rob Bartlett and Bob Nelson, I think Eddie Murphy, Dave Hawthorne. I don't know if Murphy was even there yet. It was very early on when the comedians were kind of starting to take over Dixon's. It was a variety show, but it became more comics. And I'm going to go out there with my guitar and do what and I'm scared because this is not the Off-Hour Rockers or Jackie. This is, instead of playing music and telling jokes, this is going to be telling jokes and playing music. And I'm ready to go. And 5 seconds before Miniveri introduces me, Myers walks over to me and says into my ear, he says, "I don't think they're going to buy your shit." I have never forgotten. I have never, it's like forget about being accepted. You haven't got a shot, But it was such an indoctrination into this world, like.
The last time Myers was in New York, I saw him a number of years now. He said something that was really funny to me, but also hit home. We were at the bar in Levittown at Governor's, and 2 beautiful women walked through the front door. And I turned to him and I said, "Jim, I remember a time when you and I would have gone right over there." And without missing a beat, he goes, "I remember a time when they would have been glad to see us."
I can't help but think to myself, Bales is standing there with Myers, and they look over, and there's 2 hot girls. Were they 2 hot girls in 2010, or were they 2 hot girls that would have been hot when you looked over at them in 1980?
Right.
I mean, because your standards just plummet. I remember I used to walk around New York City and looking for girls who I'd like to have sex with, and now I'd walk around New York City and I can't see a girl I wouldn't have sex with. Not that anybody's offering, and not that I'm getting anywhere.
One time in
the point being, I'll let that slide. That's okay. What's a crutch?
One time at a rest stop off the New York Thruway at 4 o'clock in the morning, coming back from a gig, we stopped off to get something to eat, and I swear to you, Myers calls over our waitress and tells her, "See those 2 girls at that table? Send them over 2 glasses of orange juice on us." And the waitress did. And we see her come over and put down the orange juice and point at the 2 guys. And Myers went like that. Nothing came of it, unfortunately. But they drank the juice.
There was nothing like the male ego. I don't know why this story has stayed with me, but my college roommate, when I first got to Michigan State, my college roommate was from Livonia, Michigan. And he was a smart guy, but he rode with the motorcycle guys in Livonia. He was one of those mixture guys. Like, he literally would be walking around campus, and guys would see him, and they go, "Puskus, what are you doing up here? You working construction?" Honestly, because they didn't know. And so I wasn't with him. I would like to tell a story like I witnessed, but I didn't witness it. But one of his motorcycle hoodlum pals came up, and they went over to the student union, and they were going to walk up and go into the student union, and 2 nice-looking girls were walking up and about to go through the door, and his friend with a flourish jumped in front of the girls and held open the door. And as the girls walked through, he looked at one of them and said, "Hey, big time, you're looking ever so mellow." And the girl turned and looked him up and down and said, "You hurt."
Wow.
Nick said he fell down. He fell down. Like,
Oh. Now listen, before we go, John Blenn, you were such a terrific guest, a primary source when it comes to Long Island history. I'm going to put some pressure on you. Can you remember a time at a Long Island club, music or comedy, that you would consider a magic moment that you haven't forgotten? Little pressure, I know.
Well, I've seen a lot of magic moments. I mean, obviously, you guys know I'm very close with Joe DeLion. The first time I saw Joe do comedy on a Wednesday night in Chuckles, just totally unexpected, didn't know a thing about him, just with that whole character with the hitch, it just destroyed the place. And you could tell you were watching something really special. He was up and down, of course, with his approach throughout the years, but that night, couldn't do any wrong. The first time I saw Brian Regan, he literally hurt me. I saw him at Brokerage right before he moved up to theaters, but he just put on a 45-minute tour de force. I saw Richard Jeni do a weekend at Brokerage, and he did 3 sets of an hour without repeating material twice on those 3 shows.
Right.
So, I mean, you know you're seeing something extra special. I've seen new artists like Davey Knowles, who hardly anybody knows, great blues guitar player, was a prodigy that Peter Frampton produced his first album a few years back, but saw him at the Bolton Center and knew this is a guitar player under the radar that has remarkable skill that is just tremendous. Yeah, I mean, you know when something's there and you're seeing a show that's just a little bit extra special. And yeah, that's been a good amount of them over the years. I've really been blessed to be able to cover a lot of those things.
Yeah, great, John. He didn't mention you or me.
Well, you didn't let me mention just being here on this show.
Did we do the Brian Regan story from Fort Lauderdale? Did I tell that story?
I don't think so.
Brian Regan, we used to go work at Fort Lauderdale Comic Shop 2, 3, 4 times a year, and it was a thrill. It was horrible pay, 7 nights a week. It was slave labor, but we all fought to get down there. It was so much fun. So a pot and booze and girls, and it was so loose and crazy. And Brian lived down there, and he was not the janitor, but he worked around the club to try and get stage time. He'd sweep up, he'd cook the steaks, he'd cook the chicken, he'd do whatever he had to do to get stage time. And after a certain amount of time, Joe, the manager, decided, all right, we're going to give Brian 5 minutes on a Saturday night. And he's all excited. And everybody, he was a great guy, I liked him a lot. And I said to him, hey, Brian, it's always fun when the comedians joke around with each other. And I said, if you want to have some fun tonight, because he was going on Saturday night, I think it was only 1 show anyway, but packed on Saturday nights. I said, in the middle of your act, say, I had a date with the twins last night. And I'll yell from the back of the room, did you have a good time? And you go, yes and no. I said, and the audience will love it because it's such a stupid joke, and it just the over their heads, and he's like, okay, and he wants to be in with the gang, like oh, that's so cool, I'm included, but so he's up there, and he's only got like 5 or 7 minutes, but he's doing fine, he's doing fine. And out of a clear blue sky, he says, hey, I had a date with twins last night, and I yelled, how was it? Which is. And he was like, stop! And we screamed. It came to a dead halt. Rory's my old manager, Rory Rosegarten, is his manager. I think Brian is still mad at me for that. But that's, but that's such an unfair practical joke on a brand new guy,
No, if you can make another comedian uncomfortable on stage, you do it.
I saw Regan one night on a very funny thing along those lines. He used to do a bit about his science project not working out, and nothing grew, and the teacher says to him, it all leads up to his uncle doesn't grow corn for a living. He gets up at the crack of noon to make sure nothing's growing. So at the end of this bit, he calls it back. So almost at the end of the show, he goes, yeah, my uncle doesn't grow corn, and nothing was growing. He looks around the room, absolutely nothing. He goes, John, did I miss the setup? He's like, you did. And then the audience erupts laughing. He's like, thank you. He goes, okay, good night. He forgot to do the entire setup.
He did a callback without doing the original joke. Every comedian has done that. Oh, my goodness. John Blenn, you are terrific.
We will do it
Thank you
again.
for having me. This was great. It's great
John
catch up.
Blenn with 2 N's.
I got an idea. At some point, we'll do a show, and we'll have Danny McKenna and John Blenn, and we'll have a best guest off.
I love the idea.
Just to be rude.
All right, Stand-Up Memories will be back next week with another episode.
Next week we have a dwarf and an overweight stripper. Is that okay with you? I didn't clear that with you.
No, we'll figure it out. We'll see you next week.
No, I forgot to say, the dwarf and the overweight stripper are the same person.
Can I come back?
John Blenn.
The bad news is, her name is John Blenn. No. Yes, you're invited back anytime. Please tune in.
John Blenn, Jackie the Joke Man, Martling Peter Bales. We'll see you next week.
Stand-Up Memories.
Hey, a new episode of Stand-Up Memories every Wednesday.
How exciting is that?
Starring me, Peter Bales, and right here, Jackie the Joke Man, Martling.
Please follow us on social media. Search it out. What is it? MeSpace?
MySpace,
Your space?
TikTok, Instagram, Facebook.
Doodah, doodah.